Welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of We're Just Talking About It. Today we continue our conversation with ex-Muslim Omayma. In the first episode with Omayma, she shared stories of what it was like growing up in a very strict Muslim home. Now today, she's talking about what it's like after leaving Islam, the transformation, and finding her identity. 3 years after leaving the religion, Omayma admits it's a journey she is still on. So you're having all these intense revelations. Do you ever remember a moment where you stopped and just were like, I absolutely cannot go on with this anymore?
Look, it's all like a serious blur. that period, like immediately before leaving. I was talking about it with my housemates last night, actually, and I just thought, oh my, because they were like, well, we're gonna have to sit down one day and actually talk about this properly. And I was like, I can't even really give you that much detail. Like, I know there are defining moments, but oh my God, it's all just so crazy. It's so surreal to look back on now. But I do remember, I guess, I remember the hijab moment very clearly. Like, it's actually quite funny. I went to the gym and I was so hot and bothered in the layers that I had on. I came home and I was like, oh, God, do I really have to wear this? Is so annoying. And I think that I had those thoughts so many times over the years, but that moment, there wasn't that immediate follow-up of, oh, yes, you do, on you go with your life. I was like, oh, well, maybe? Like, there was there was that, yeah, exactly. I was like, it wasn't the instant rebuff that I was used to. Stop thinking about it. I was just like, well, let's just see about that. And then another moment I remember is on Facebook, I read, I think it's a page that I still follow now. It was like the Middle Eastern Feminist or something like that. And they were writing about modesty as a feminist tool. And I sort of trusted that interpretation a lot more because I thought, well, they know from in the Middle East, they really understand what modesty means to us. And so an analysis of modesty from that perspective, which was basically them saying, well, forcing a woman to cover up so that people can look beyond her sexuality to value her as a human being is just as bad as sexualizing or objectifying a woman who's half naked. Like, that's the exact same thing. Like, you're still enforcing behaviors on women or standards on women because you can't see past, their beauty or lust or whatever it is. And I think because I'd already had that moment of thinking, well, is the hijab non-negotiable to me? Reading that afterwards, I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. So it's just, I think, from then on, it was a process of interpreting things that I would have rejected straight away before, now actually considering them and going, okay, do these actually have a valid basis? And that's why I think, my journey really makes me believe that you can't tell someone to give up their faith. That's not going to work. They have to, the seed of doubt has to be planted first. Otherwise, everything's an attack. Everything's a personal, attack against the religion, and it's just not going to go anywhere. But because I'd already had that moment of thinking, well, what value is the hijab actually bringing to my life? I was able to accept, an analysis of it that I wouldn't have before had I just been too defensive over it to listen. So, it's given me a really good perspective now, I think, to know that's how, and to reflect over how that process happened for me.
I think that's a great point. I talk about that a lot with people as an educator, that you'll never convince anybody to change a heartfelt belief. If they hold it dearly and close to their heart, nothing you say will convince them. That all you can do is talk, and if they somehow discover in themselves a reason to change, then they'll do it. Exactly. Otherwise, you're just wasting your breath. You can just give facts and let people make their own decisions. Because if it's closely held, they're willing to die for it. You're not going to
Yeah.
argue them out of it.
Yeah, and particularly Islam, there's a lot of early on the way that the belief becomes ingrained in you is so, like, it's impossible to separate from your own sense of self. Like, it's really insane how much of a transformation internally you have to go through to be able to discuss the religion objectively with someone. It's huge. It really is.
Was there a level of fear? I feel like there would have to be some fear, especially with your family. You're feeling this way, these things are changing in your mind, your perspective is changing. It's not like you can go home and talk to your parents about what you're feeling or what you're learning, what you're thinking. Was there a fear of, like, this is going to end badly?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I remember, like, in my head, it's a few weeks, it could have been a few months, that I was just walking around in a constant state of, I don't know, like, when you're anxious and you have that sick feeling at the bottom of your stomach and you're always cold.
Right,
like,
right.
In that state, I was literally walking around like that for, like, hours on end, day after day.
Wow.
Because I was just thinking, okay, like, something's going to change. And, like, also, I had no idea what to do about it. Like, even practically, for me, I knew that I couldn't act on any of those beliefs or doubts while living at home. But part of an Islamic upbringing is that you're not independent at all. And I think it's strategic. I believe that with the father's the head of the household and he takes care of all the family affairs. I think it's strategic that the kids don't learn how to manage on their own and explore the world around them, because they really do want to keep you close so that they can manage your beliefs and your perspectives and to make sure that you don't stray too far away from the way of life that they brought you up with. So I had an element of that. So even though I was a little bit more independent than a lot of other women that I hear about that go through the same process, like, I had my license and I was working and all that sort of thing. So I was very, very lucky. But there's a lot of practical things in life that I just hadn't been exposed to, and I had no idea how to even go about detaching myself from the family. So yeah, it was really, really hard in that period leading up to it, and it's still hard. It's going to be a very long recovery to sort of get through this huge, like, fundamental change.
Yeah, this is a major shift. One of the things as I was reading and just listening to you now kind of pops into my head. I've got Muslim friends all over the world in different countries, so I've seen, every different sect of Islam. There, as I've explained before, there are dozens of them. Everybody only knows a couple of the major ones, but there are lots of different movements and groups and subsects, and each local mosque kind of has its own flavor in many countries. And some of my Muslim friends will say, look, my wife is never covered. I'm not going to worry about having my kids covered. I don't go to mosque very often. I do teach my kids to pray. We may not pray all the time, and I've seen that in many religions. But so there are more, I don't know, say liberal or progressive kind of theologies or ways that some people practice Islam. They haven't left Islam, but that's kind of where they are in the religion. They still are Muslim. I've got Jewish friends that are the same way. I never go to temple, but I'm still Jewish. I'm Christian. I never go to church. So do you think you would have hit that point in your life? You were raised more of that very conservative Salafi, view of Sunni Islam. I think you said your dad was connected with the Muslim Brotherhood or knew people of that very conservative view. If you had grown up in a more progressive or laxed theological interpretation of Islam, do you think you would have hit that same point as quickly, or would you even hit it at all?
I think that's a great question. It's really hard to imagine how different the trajectory would have actually been had I not been forced to choose between such drastically different worldviews. So maybe if women's rights had been incorporated more thoroughly into the way that I practiced my religion, I wouldn't have had to choose between the two, and I would have been satisfied to remain within the religion. Yeah, it's really, really difficult to predict. But I don't know if so as I said, my personality is like, I'm very analytical, very sort of logical, even in emotional issues. Like when I'm dealing with my friends, and they always say to me, "Oh my God, like I forget that you're going to take what I've just said exactly as I've said it." Because,
I shouldn't have said that.
Exactly. I'm just very straightforward. I like to put things in boxes in my mind and really understand it. I absolutely hate grey areas. But I don't know if maybe being raised with that Salafi interpretation of Islam, which is very literal, it's very purist, it's very much like we don't want liberal interpretations that make it Islam compatible with the modern world, because the modern world is, going to hell in a handbasket. So why would we do that? I don't know if that shaped those qualities within me, or if I had them first and therefore would have rejected liberal interpretations of Islam. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. But it's possible. It's possible that I would have remained a Muslim had I been able to support gay rights, if I'd been able to be pro-choice, which I am, if I'd been able to choose the values that really represented how I felt about the world, and it wouldn't compromise my engagement with the religion, I may have still believed. Yeah, I'm not sure.
And like Jason kind of said, I think you're not alone in that, because Christian, Baptist, Catholic, I've struggled with that in my own life. Like, I don't believe what they're saying in this mass, and so I'm going to leave. And can I just cherry pick what I wanted to take away that made sense? Is that how religion works? And you kind of walk that line, and you're like, I'm never going to find something that's all encompassing, right? Or is there something out there? And you kind of just figure I'm going to stick to what I believe in and my values and my integrity, and take what makes sense to me. It's definitely a hard choice. As like an individual, what are you going to represent? What intellectual journey are you, really invested in making? And I think the other interesting thing actually about the liberal Muslim thing, and how I would have reacted to that had I been raised that way, is at the end of the day, there's still the scripture, and the scripture isn't liberal. So Muslims can choose to take from it what they believe, and there's a lot of scholars that will look at the scripture and go, oh no, that's just a metaphorical meaning, like hell isn't fire, it's actually just the pain of not being with God in the afterlife, because that's hell is not seeing God, it's not actually being burned alive for an eternity, for example. And so there's like a lot of those interpretations out there, but I'm not sure if I would have been motivated to go back to the source and read about what these things were like originally. So, and if that had happened, then I think I would have ended up in the same place, because the scripture is quite clearly against the values that I believe in. So, it just depends on what I would have been motivated to do, given my context. And that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I was gonna, and I think we're kind of getting into this territory. How hard is it, or how difficult is it to be, especially a woman? And I've met men who've left Islam before and other religions, and seen what happens to them. Sometimes it's fine. Sometimes parents disown them. Sometimes it's life altering, and it can destroy their lives. I mean, it is a struggle. I know, I can picture exactly what you're going through, but I think that you have that additional layer from where you're coming from. How hard is it to be a woman who has left Islam, and you're living in a very westernized area? Can you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think I would probably have a little bit, like, I'm very new into vocalizing my ex-Muslim sort of journey. It's only been a few months that I've really started engaging with that world. Prior to that, I was just trying to get through my life.
Sure.
So I haven't really experienced, like, I know a lot of other, like, vocal female ex-Muslims, and the vitriol that they're on the receiving end of, and the abuse is definitely, like, so much more amplified for them. And it's always of a sexual nature as well. Like, the assumption is that because so much of a woman's existence in Islam is about her sexuality, and there's a lot of policing of her sexuality and how she, I guess, how she engages with it. When she leaves and people perceive that, okay, she's let go of all those restraints, so she's now, a sexual deviant, a lot of the abuse is sexual in nature, and it's really, really horrific, some of the things that I've seen. But yeah, for me, on a personal level with my family, we're still at the very beginning stages of navigating our relationship. I've really, like, shielded myself from them a lot, and just out of fear, we haven't talked about it really, like, up front. I've talked to my mum a little bit, and at the moment it seems like they just want to maintain some sort of relationship, but I have a lot of reservations about being too open with them, because I'm not quite sure what they're capable of doing, and I know that, like, as with a lot of other Muslim parents, they are prone to emotional manipulation to ensure that the children stay within the boundaries that they've originally set, or the boundaries of the doctrine. I saw it myself when my brother started rebelling. Earlier on, he wanted to date and stuff like that, and my mum thought, oh my God, this is just the beginning. He's going to leave the religion completely. She she would discuss with me strategies that she'd employ to make sure he didn't forget his roots, and that he felt emotionally obligated to stick with certain principles and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I guess I don't have as much to share about the female side of it, really, because, like, as I said, I'm so lucky that I'm in a Western country. Nobody thinks twice about anything that I do as a woman. Like, there's no difference. I walk out in short shorts and a singlet, and nobody bats an eyelid. And yeah, I'm basically just living my own life. And yeah, I've had a great experience so far, but that's because I haven't engaged with Islam very much since leaving. So maybe in 6 months' time, I could give you a different answer. We'll see. But I know from secondhand that it is a drastic difference. So.
Yeah, just to let the audience know, we met through Twitter. So because I follow so many different voices on Twitter, I just happened to see a conversation that you and another woman were having, and I just kind of reached out to you all and said, hey, I like these conversations, and that's what I'm doing, is giving people voice. So that's how we met. But I'm with you. I have read some of the treatment, especially towards women on social media, and what people say to them and what they wish upon them. It will burn your eyes. I mean, it is just horrendous stuff you would never say in person to another human being, because somebody would deck you. I mean, it's some pretty nasty things, and we wish you all the best as you work through that, and hopefully you do not get in touch with people like that. I think a good thing, where you live, it's probably a lot like America. Religion doesn't come up all the time. We don't talk about it very often.
No.
So you do kind of avoid that. You don't just stumble into it every day.
Definitely. I'm so lucky. I can't even imagine what women that haven't been able to extract themselves from that community are going through. It's just one of those things that you, from a theoretical level, you know how horrific it must be, but you can't actually imagine it in any sort of tangible way. I just feel like really heartbroken for them and their situation. So I really am so grateful for my experience. But I just wanted to mention one thing with that, the difference between men and women leaving Islam. I think that one of the the game changers is the fact that not only the sexual sort of management of women while they're in Islam and how that affects how men see them once they, and other women, how they see them once they leave. It's also this sense, I think it's a greater betrayal when a woman leaves Islam, because in Islam, she is essentially owned by someone in the religion. And I know it's not a very popular opinion, but for me, like, the guardianship system in Islam, it very clearly resembles a form of custody that the woman is attached to someone through. And the idea is always, like, people assume, or they know, that a woman will belong to someone in that community, whether it's her husband or her father or her brother or her uncle. Someone is responsible for her, and she never gets past that stage. Women can't grow up to then become independent. As a 60-year-old woman, her guardian can be a 13-year-old boy. They can't ever detach themselves from that system. So when they choose to leave, it's like this outrage of, but you were ours as well. So that they're not independent in Islam. So the shock factor of them reclaiming their independence enough to leave it is just mind-boggling to some.
So that is where we will pause for this week, but you can tell we're beginning the conversation about the guardianship program in Islam. It can be a pretty controversial topic, and that is where we pick up next episode. So stay with us. As always, thanks for listening, and feel free to email us or find us on social media at We're Just Talking About It.